The most advanced battle tanks in the world on the way to the front lines in Ukraine. Zelensky argued they would be a game changer in their war against Russia. And finally, Germany and the US both agree to send these vital weapons.
The expectation on the part of Russia is we're going to break up. We're not going to stay united. But we are fully, thoroughly, totally united.
The move stokes fresh fury from Putin, but will there be consequences for the West? We'll hear from John in Kharkiv and Robert in Washington, also in News at 10 tonight. With no sign of Nadhim Zahawi at PMQs, Rishi Sunak takes the flak over his party chairman's tax affairs. Hospitals aren't safe for patients, a brutally honest assessment from one NHS chief executive at a board meeting. And Oscar-nominated director Guillermo del Toro tells us why artificial intelligence will never replace true filmmaking.
Art is not there to decorate. Art is there to express pain and the need to live and have a voice. So, so for me, it's almost an affront in the face of the universe.
This is ITV News at 10 with Rageh Omar.
Good evening. For months, Ukraine has said that if the West truly wants to help it win the war once Russia begins its spring offensive, it needed advanced battle tanks, in particular Germany's Leopard 2s. Ukraine has asked and it lobbied. Today, finally, Germany agreed. Berlin will send 14 of them, but more importantly, it will allow other countries with its Leopard tanks to do the same. The Germans wanted the safety in numbers of America following suit, which President Biden duly did today. He committed 31 American Abrams tanks to the battlefields of eastern Ukraine. It's 11 terrible months since Russian troops invaded, and it will be a few more before the tanks get there and Ukrainian troops are trained to operate them. But the timing is significant. Some could just about be ready for a spring offensive by Russia. And today, incidentally, is President Zelensky's birthday, and it's probably the present he most wanted.
After weeks of international pressure, even arm twisting, Berlin has finally given way. A small number of Leopard 2 tanks in its armory will be sent to Ukraine. Much more importantly, countries like Poland and Finland, who bought their Leopards from Germany, will be allowed to re-export them eastwards to join the fight against Russia. When German Chancellor Olaf Scholz made the announcement to the Bundestag today, you might have thought it had been his idea all along.
Deutschland wird, wie gesagt,
Germany will make Leopard 2 A6 tanks available to Ukraine, he said, which will come from the German army's stocks. And we will make it possible for allies to deliver them as well. Ladies and gentlemen, that is the right principle.
Das ist das richtige Prinzip.
In reality, Scholz never wanted German-built tanks to join this war. Reluctantly, he agreed to do so only if NATO allies did too. But when Britain said 14 Challenger 2s were going to Ukraine, Berlin said, not good enough. Only when America sends these, its Abrams M1 main battle tank, will we send our Leopards. Today, President Biden confirmed that after discussions with Germany, France and Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, Abrams main battle tanks are on their way.
Today, I'm announcing that the United States will be sending 31 Abrams tanks to Ukraine, the equivalent of 1 Ukrainian battalion. I'm grateful to Chancellor Scholz for providing German Leopard 2 tanks and will lead an effort to organize a European contribution of 2 tank battalions for Ukraine.
For President Putin in Moscow this morning, this only goes to reinforce his long-held belief that Europeans are just puppets of America. The US forces in Germany are, strictly speaking, an occupying force, he said. Even German politicians say that Germany has never been a sovereign state in the full sense of the word. However he interprets it, the Russian army will soon be facing an enemy equipped with at least 80, maybe more, of the world's most advanced tanks. And more importantly, NATO will have made a definitive statement that it's no longer intimidated by Russian threats of escalation, no longer worried about seeing Russian forces suffer a humiliating defeat. In fact, they want to see exactly that happen, sooner rather than later. James Mates, News at 10.
Well, 14 tanks from Germany is nowhere near what Ukraine says it needs. But Germany's agreement on its Leopard 2 tanks clears the way for other countries with them to release some of theirs. And there are hundreds in storage. Carl is here to take us through the importance of Germany and America's offer of battle tanks to Ukraine.
Yes, this has the potential, at least, Rageh, to be a significant moment in this conflict because NATO allies are now sending Ukraine 3 different types of modern battle tank. Britain led the way, of course, with those Challenger 2s, but it was the American M1 Abrams offered today which finally unlocked the German-built Leopard 2s. Now, the logistics of running 3 different types of tank aren't straightforward. For example, the Challengers and the Leopards both run on diesel, but the Abrams prefers jet fuel and lots of it. And whereas the Leopards and the Abrams use similar ammunition, the Challenger fires something really quite different. But they all offer the Ukrainians very modern capabilities like night fighting, electronic jamming equipment to counter threats like drones, and computerized weapons which allow them to hit moving targets whilst themselves on the move.
The Ukrainians have now got the opportunity with some extraordinary equipment to be able to elevate their game and to do something which the Russians are going to find very difficult to resist. And the moment that these are seen with the Ukrainian flags on, that's going to have a psychological impact to the way in which the Russians are conducting themselves in Ukraine.
So let's take a look at those all-important numbers. The UK is committing a squadron of 14 Challengers. The US is putting in 31 Abrams. Germany is offering 14 Leopards, but it's the Leopards which are critical because of the potential numbers available. There are a couple of thousand of them all around Europe, and with Germany now permitting their export to Ukraine, Poland is expected to offer another 14, and Norway, Finland, the Netherlands, Spain and Portugal are all thought to be considering more. It may not be the 300 tanks Kiev says it wants, but a significant number nonetheless, although it won't be quick. The Germans expect training to run from early February to mid-March, with their Leopard 2s available in Ukraine by April. But other tanks, especially the highly complex Abrams, Rageh, could take much longer.
Well, it's a big development, Carl. And one word in a tweet from Ukraine's Deputy Foreign Minister summed up the relief in Ukraine that more Western tanks are on the way. That word, hallelujah. Our correspondent John Ray has been following Ukraine's reaction from Kharkiv in northeastern Ukraine, and he sent this update earlier tonight.
Well, there's no doubt this is a big step forward for Ukraine. You have to remember, when you travel up and down the front lines here, you will often see soldiers fighting this war with kit which is older than they are, in tanks which are in some cases 50 years old, at least in design. So the West today has crossed a very important line in terms of the quality of the military support it is providing. These are modern, offensive weapons, and just a few months ago it would have been almost impossible to think they would be coming this way, almost as unlikely as giving the Ukrainian Air Force Western fighter jets. Incidentally, they are now top of Ukraine's wish list. These tanks are a necessary, though not sufficient, condition for victory. They'll need to be backed by a lot of armour and a lot of artillery. But the big point here is this, that Vladimir Putin has always hoped that the West would weary of this war. That is also Ukraine's great fear. Today, they got exactly what they wanted, but only at the cost of making public very deep divisions within NATO. So the next time Ukraine comes looking for kit, perhaps those jet fighters, who knows what the reaction from the West will be.
John Ray in Kharkiv. To Washington, where Robert joins me now. Robert, the question, I suppose, is how significant a moment is this for the West, and what are the risks?
Oh, I think, Rageh, highly significant in a tortuous year-long journey, certainly for this White House. Do you remember, initially After the invasion of Ukraine, the US was providing simple defensive weaponry like those Javelin anti-tank missiles. By the spring and summer, they were putting in artillery and mobile rocket systems like the HIMARS, but limiting their range to reduce the risk of escalation. And now main battle tanks. The White House position, I think, is pretty clear. They're trying to ensure that the NATO alliance remains effective and united in defending Ukraine. But yes, I mean, there are questions and risks emerging, as John alluded to there, from Ukraine. What does the West say in response to Ukrainian pleas for F-16s, or perhaps further down the road for fifth-generation F-35 fighters? What happens if these tanks are not used defensively in the Donbass, but used to attack Russian forces defending and surrounding Crimea? I think the imagery, the visuals of this are going to be pretty startling very soon. You know, Western tanks on a Central European battlefield for the first time since 1945. Not just a gift to Ukraine, of course, but also a gift to Kremlin propagandists.
Robert, thanks very much indeed. Home now, and as the Conservative Party chair, Nadhim Zahawi hangs on to his job. Support at today's Prime Minister's questions from Rishi Sunak was rather more measured than a week ago. There was no sign of the Conservative Party chair himself in the House of Commons as his boss fended off attacks from the opposition. Labour's Sir Keir Starmer said Mr Sunak was too weak to sack him. Mr Sunak said the investigation into Mr Zahawi's tax affairs must be allowed to do its job.
Morning, Prime Minister. Are you going to have to sack your party chairman, Prime Minister?
As he headed to Parliament, the Prime Minister knew he would definitely need to buckle up for this one. A lot can happen in a week in politics. Since his last PMQs, Rishi Sunak's been fined for not wearing a seatbelt and is facing tricky questions about one of his cabinet ministers.
Does the Prime Minister agree that any politician who seeks to avoid the taxes they owe in this country is not fit to be in charge of taxpayer money?
In the last week, it's been revealed that during his short time as Chancellor, the Conservative Party's current chairman, Nadhim Zahawi, paid a penalty in his multi-million-pound tax dispute with HMRC. Today, he appeared to be missing from the chamber, leaving the Prime Minister to face questions about what he knew about Zahawi's tax affairs and when.
No issues were raised with me when he was appointed to his current role. And since I commented on this matter last week, more information has come forward. And that is why I have asked the independent adviser to look into the matter.
Now, last week, the Prime Minister told this House that the chair of the Tory party had addressed his tax affairs in full. This week, after days of public pressure, the Prime Minister now says there are serious questions to answer. What changed?
Prime Minister. Mr Speaker, I know he reads from these prepared sheets, but he should listen to what I actually say.
Today, one Conservative backbencher told ITV News, Rishi is too weak to sack Zahawi, it seems. When does it end? Another said he needs to go. It's embarrassing. But one added, a decision shouldn't be made on the back of speculation and media pressure. It's entirely possible he can survive this. Sir Craig Oliver spent 6 years working in Downing Street as a top Tory adviser.
As somebody who's worked in Number 10, can you explain to us why you think Rishi Sunak has not sacked Zahawi?
If he fires Nadhim Zahawi, his backbenchers feel that he hasn't been given due process and they'll be very unhappy. If he waits to the end of the inquiry, people say, look, you're just weak, you're taking on more and more damage.
Zahawi has said his error was careless and not deliberate. Sunak and his cabinet head to Chequers for an away day tomorrow. There is lots to discuss. Amy Lewis, News at 10.
And Robert joins us from the set of his Peston programme, which is coming up shortly. Robert, we were just hearing there that Rishi Sunak is hosting that big Conservative Party away day at Chequers tomorrow. It comes at a very tricky time for the Prime Minister. Will his backing for Zahawi last, do you think?
Well, as you say, really difficult for the Prime Minister. This away day is what's known as a political cabinet. They're supposed to be setting the politics of this government for the next year over and up to the general election. You'd normally want the advice of your party chairman, but Zahawi's, I'm afraid, his future is very much in the balance at the moment. I mean, I've just interviewed Mel Stride, the Work and Pension Secretary, for my programme. David Davis, also on the programme, former senior Tory minister. Neither of them gave me anything approaching a guarantee that Zahawi would survive, and it's not altogether surprising. I mean, I put to the Work and Pension Secretary that aggressive tax avoidance was not something you'd expect of a senior cabinet minister, and he gave me a definition of aggressive tax avoidance as being holding assets offshore, which that's what it looks as though Zahawi was doing. He didn't say that Zahawi should go. He said it's up to the independent ethics advisor, the Prime Minister, to make a ruling on this before the Prime Minister makes up his mind. But I have to say, listening to both Davis and Stride, I wouldn't rate Zahawi's chances of surviving terribly highly.
Well, that's one set of problems for the Prime Minister. There's more pressure on him tonight, isn't there? Because The Guardian reports that as many as 24 civil servants are involved in complaints against his Deputy Prime Minister, Dominic Raab.
I mean, again, absolutely extraordinary, isn't it? I mean, 24 officials alleging bullying by the Justice Secretary, one of the people actually closest to Sunak, really helped him during his election campaign in the summer. This is very embarrassing, very damaging for Rishi Sunak. We're waiting for the results of this investigation. Again, David Davis, I put this to him on my programme. You can hear the full interview in just a few minutes, because Davis used to employ Dominic Raab. David Davis says, yes, he's got sharp elbows, yes, he's not everybody's cup of tea, but he never saw any bullying himself. We'll just have to wait and see again what the independent adjudication makes of all of this.
OK, Robert, look forward to your programme. Thanks very much indeed. Now, the Amazon warehouse in Coventry made history today because workers in what the company calls its fulfilment centre there became the first in the UK to go on strike. There is not, it seems, much fulfilment in working there. First, there's the pay. They got a 5% pay rise of 50 pence an hour. They want £5. Then there are the conditions, where they say even toilet breaks are timed.
It all began here at this vast Amazon warehouse in Coventry. At 1 minute past midnight, dozens of night shift workers downed tools. They started to head towards the exit, and they joined a unique picket line. The first ever strike by Amazon workers in the UK was underway. Temperatures were low, but spirits high, as morning arrived with news that over 300 were walking out, with a number joining the union this morning. So why are these warehouse workers striking?
We've worked really hard, under pressure, and we see the profits that you're making of us. So why such a little pay rise?
Garfield Hilton said it was a post-COVID pay rise offer of just 50 pence an hour last summer that galvanised colleagues. But he argued it wasn't just about pay.
You have a degree of resilience. If I say that my elbow's gone at one time, my finger here, repetitive strain. I used to wear compression socks because when I come home at night and lay down, my legs were actually fizzing for half hour, 40 minutes.
Garfield, who is 59 with diabetes, said workers are effectively given warnings if they fall behind their expected work rate. Amazon said, we're proud to offer competitive pay, which starts at a minimum of between £10.50 and £11.45 per hour, depending on location. This represents a 29% increase in the minimum hourly wage paid to Amazon employees since 2018. The company argued this strike was tiny, involving only a fraction of 1% of their UK workforce. But with strikes already in the US, Germany, Spain and beyond, and discussions in Geneva this week on more worldwide action, unions say it's the start of something and insist Amazon can afford it.
The fact that they did £204 million in pre-tax profit in the last financial year, you know, the owner of the business sends rockets into space as a hobby. You know, that's how much money this company has.
For now, it is yet another strike, but Amazon say not one that will disrupt its customers. Anushka Astana, News at 10.
Now, a big boss in the health service has had some explaining to do after appearing to suggest that hospitals aren't safe for sick people. What Nick Hume, who is in charge of 2 large NHS trusts, actually said was the worst place you can possibly be in the entire health system is a hospital. He said the food is rubbish, patients find it hard to sleep, and they aren't told what is going on. What Mr. Hume was actually trying to do was persuade patients not to descend on hospitals unless it's really necessary.
The NHS is in the midst of the worst crisis in its history. Delays in ambulances, waits in A&E, care in corridors, and people dying when they shouldn't be. Now one NHS hospital boss has made a frank admission about what he sees as the dire state of a crippling health service.
The worst place you can possibly be in the entire health system is a hospital, unless you need to be there. They are horrible places. The food's rubbish, we don't let you sleep, we don't let you know what's going on. And I've stayed in some fairly dodgy hotels in my time, but I've never had to share a bathroom with 6 people. They're awful, and we've got to get that message out. They're not safe places. So unless you really need to be there, you just shouldn't be there.
Mr. Hume, who runs Ipswich and Colchester hospitals, has worked in the NHS for 35 years. His comments at a board meeting were candid and reveal what might be regarded as uncomfortable truths.
I think patients across the country will be terrified that the people who run our hospitals say that they're not safe, they are horrible places and the worst place you could possibly be.
Keep our patients safe! Mr. Hume's hospitals, like others in the country, have seen nurses walk out over pay and conditions while struggling with unprecedented winter pressures, all in the aftermath of the pandemic, which he said had seen emergency care accept the unacceptable.
If we'd had 5 patients overnight in A&E without a bed in a pre-COVID world, that would have led to almost a major incident. Now, if it's 5, we're kind of, we're really pleased.
Mr. Hume, seen here hosting former Prime Minister Boris Johnson in 2021, later clarified his comments in a statement, saying those who have a clinical need to be in an acute hospital, it is the best place to be. The government told us it's taking urgent action to improve access to emergency care. Sejal Karia, News at 10.
Well, there's no escaping the scale of the task that the head of the UK's largest police force also faces in driving out corrupt and criminal officers. Today, the Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police, Sir Mark Rowley, said that 2 or 3 of them will be appearing in court every week as he tries to root them out of the force. Rebecca is at Scotland Yard. Rebecca, another worrying admission, isn't it, from the Met?
Yeah, the man who's promised to root out those who corrupt the integrity of this police force is, at least it seems, being honest about the scale of the problem. Today, Sir Mark Rowley admitted that there will be more painful stories to emerge. This follows, of course, the case of David Carrick, who was a Met police officer for 20 years before admitting to being a serial rapist. Earlier, speaking at the London Assembly, the Met Police Commissioner said that his officers regularly appeared in court facing charges of dishonesty, violence against women and girls, domestic abuse and sex offences. And he said that in the coming weeks and months, he expects 2 or 3 of those cases every week, an indication of just how commonplace it's become for Met police officers to face serious allegations.
Lifting the stone and revealing painful truths will not be resolved overnight, and I mustn't pretend it will do, and I hope you understand that that can't be done. We have to prepare for more painful stories as we confront the issues that we face.
So as his work continues, you can only assume that the number of officers facing both disciplinary and legal action will increase.
Thanks, Rebecca. A month after the fatal Christmas Eve shooting of the Merseyside beautician Ellie Edwards, her funeral was held today in Wallasey. She was shot as she celebrated with friends in a pub in the town. She was not the intended target of the attack. Her father, Tim, was one of the pallbearers who carried her coffin into the church. It's not called the space race for nothing, I guess, and after one launch site's misfortune is another's opportunity. That is certainly the case for the spaceport on Shetland after Cornwall's satellite launch went wrong a fortnight ago. They are now in line to host the first successful UK space liftoff.
The rugged and remote landscape of Shetland has long drawn visitors from around the world. And on the same shores where longboats were once launched, Shetland's industrial landscape is about to enter a new stratosphere.
It'll be an amazing feeling when the first rocket is launched.
Shetlander Elizabeth Johnson is project manager here at Saxavord Spaceport in the northerly island of Unst.
I suppose it's a bit crazy to think a granny is project managing the build of a spaceport, but these are the crazy kind of things that happen up here.
There's a lot on the line for this spaceport. They could become the first in the UK to successfully launch satellites and therefore attracting sought-after business. Virgin Orbit's failure in Cornwall earlier this month proved how much is at stake. Eyes are now turning to Shetland.
This is the most northerly point of the United Kingdom, making it the perfect location to launch rockets into orbit. In fact, the next piece of land directly north from here is the Arctic.
And our geography allows us to launch into the right trajectories to get into the right orbits economically and efficiently.
The UK space industry is growing quickly, with 7 proposed launch sites. Alongside Cornwall in the far south, Wales will have one in Snowdonia, but Scotland has the lion's share with 5. Prestwick, Campbelltown, Western Isles, Sutherland and Shetland, including the UK's only vertical launch pads.
I would expect that as we go through the remainder of this decade, we should be moving towards a position where we're launching 1 to 2 times every month. So again, it'll become a much more exciting sector and one which kind of people can get involved and go and see launches regularly.
For liftoff, these spaceports are awaiting Civil Aviation Authority approval. Then, with a successful launch, it would allow Scotland and the UK to gain a share of this lucrative global space market and an industry for the future. Louise Scott, News at 10.
Director Guillermo del Toro's new film Pinocchio has just been nominated for Best Animated Feature at the Oscars. There's much talk in the industry this award season about artificial intelligence taking over some of the creative processes. That's not something del Toro is too worried about. Art is more than just drawing, he told us. It is there to express pain and provide a voice.
I want to tell you a story.
One story told countless times. That of Pinocchio.
I'm a real boy!
Based loosely on the original 1883 novel, Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio is a much darker portrayal of the puppet, created using traditional stop-motion animation.
It's the oldest technique in film, almost. You know, we just build a whole world, physically build it with our hands, populate it with puppets, and then move them one frame at a time for about 1,000 days. And voila.
24 movements projected give you 1 second of action. You extract a few seconds a week.
Each frame brought to life musically by an award-winning composer, conveying everything from joy to sadness.
It can tell you so many deep emotions, hidden emotions, restrained love, so many things that just the music can tell. And in a movie like Pinocchio, with these little puppets, it's even maybe more, 10 times more.
Guillermo is best known for his fantasy films Pan's Labyrinth and The Shape of Water. An acclaimed human director, he doesn't see a place in cinema for a burgeoning trend. Art created by artificial intelligence.
There is no substitution for the act of expressing an emotion. That's what art is. Art doesn't illustrate. Art is not there to decorate. Art is there to express pain and the need to live and have a voice. So, you know, for me it's almost an affront in the face of the universe.
Pinocchio, you shouldn't lie to me!
Pinocchio has carried on the Del Toro legacy of success, already taking home a Golden Globe and a Critics' Choice Award, nominated for a BAFTA and an Oscar.
What the season allows is for more eyes to look at what you created, for more people to experience it and make it part of their lives. And that's what everybody working in this movie wanted.
My son. He's been working on it for more than a decade, but Guillermo's clearly proud he persevered with his passion project. Rishi Davda, News at 10.
And that is it for tonight from all of us. Good night.
On Good Morning Britain. He's gone where no TV actor has before. We speak exclusively to William Shatner on his trip to space and why he's now on a mission to save the planet.
How could you have a war going on in the middle of the destruction of the Earth? It's madness.
From 6 on Good Morning Britain.
It's a cold and wet outlook with some heavy downpours throughout the day. Heinz Big Soup sponsors ITV National Weather.
Good evening to you. A cold night ahead, freezing and frosty for some of us, ahead of brighter skies set to return tomorrow. Wonderful, welcome winter sunshine once more. Rain pulls away from the southeast in the next few hours, then a clear, cold night as temperatures slide. Not quite so cold compared to recent nights across southern and southeastern counties, but certainly colder further north, close to freezing in towns and cities, a little lower in the countryside, turning frosty, a touch of ice in sheltered rural spots, but the breeze keeping any fog and freezing fog at bay this time. And into tomorrow morning, a few clouds floating across the south and the east, a few rogue showers, but otherwise a fine, bright day, brilliant winter sunshine further west. Stunning here. And temperatures set to struggle. After that freezing, frosty start, just 6 or 7 degrees at best for some of us, and a biting breeze around the east will keep it even colder here through the afternoon. See you soon.
Heinz Big Soup sponsors ITV National Weather.